10 years plus now. My youngest is at the high school. She is an 11th grader, and I can't stop touting that she's a basketball player, so you need to cheer the girls' basketball team in Edina. We're going to start our forum this evening by welcoming our candidates here who are running for school board. And like everyone else has already stated, Edina Schools is great, and we need to keep the tradition going. There's always still room for improvement. The forum tonight will be moderated by Jessie Kingston. Thank you, Jessie. Jessie is a co-chair of Race and Equity Task Force and a former Edina Human Rights Commission member. And currently, she is the director of Department of Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity for the City of St. Paul. We thank her for jumping in to moderate this evening. Today, we have 12 candidates who are running for 4 seats on the school board. We have 11 of the 12 who will introduce themselves to you shortly. We reached out to Heidi Helka twice and did not get a response. Chad Bell is attending a Scouts meeting and plans to be in later. We thank all today show up on November 7th. You can vote up to 4 candidates. And now I'll turn things over to Jessie Kingston. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. I'm going to ask all of the candidates to please go ahead and take their seat. We have you spread out based on alphabetical order by your last name. Yeah, that one. Oh, you got that? Thanks. Oh, thanks. So as the candidates are getting settled, I am really excited to watch the girls basketball team or to hear them. We've got a dynasty in Minnesota. I'm an avid Lynx fan, so for anyone, we've got some good energy here in Edina. So let's go for the women. Just some quick reminders for the candidates. The first is to watch our timekeeper. eBay is going to actually be going through and letting you know your time. We'll go over that in just a minute. I also want to make sure that all of you speak into the microphone. It'll be important for people to hear you, and since we are recording this for the families who are unable to attend, we want to make sure that they can actually hear what you're saying. So the way this forum is going to work this evening is candidates are going to begin with 1.5 minutes of an opening statement in which they're going to introduce themselves on why they are running for school board, finish with 1 sentence for why they like the Edina Public Schools. We will then pose 4 questions to all the candidates to answer. If an audience member wants to ask a question, we're going to ask you that you write that down on the index cards that are being handed out right now. We have extra cards available, so if you need extra cards, please raise your hand. Once you have written your questions down, please hand them to the end of the aisle where either Ethelind or Janet will be obtaining those and then handing them to me, and we will go ahead and group those into specific themes. Questions can be submitted at any point in time by audience members. If the question is directed to a specific candidate, please make sure that you write down that candidate's name on the index card. Otherwise, that question is going to be given to all of the candidates. To get through the prepared questions and allow for time, we are going to be limiting the response time. Again, candidates will have 90 seconds to answer each question, and they will be given a little bit of time for closing statements. eBay is our timekeeper. He's going to signal a yellow card. I'm going to ask you to hold that up. That's going to tell you that you have 30 seconds remaining. When your time has expired, you will see this bright red card that's going to indicate to stop. You will need to wrap up your sentence pretty darn quickly, because I don't want to have to be the one to ask you to please be quiet. And I will. We encourage everyone to reach out to individual candidates for more questions that you may have that we didn't get to this evening, or anything. Candidates will be here after. Some may linger for a little while. Please go up and speak with them after, or arrange for one-on-one conversations. We still have some days left before November 7th, and they're in a marathon, so let's keep them busy. Finally, for everyone who's in attendance, please keep in mind that this is not a debate, but rather an opportunity for all candidates to share their views with the voting public. To that end, we ask that everyone in the audience please be respectful of the ground rules. So we are going to begin with opening statements from each of the candidates. Again, you will have 90 seconds to respond. And again, tell a little bit about yourself, why you're running for school board, and why you like the Edina Public Schools. And we're going to go in order of alphabetical last name. And so with that, I will turn it over to Gabe to begin with 90 seconds.
It says do not touch, so I will not. My name is Gabe Adderhold, and I've lived in Edina for over 22 years. I graduated from Edina High School in 2012, and this year from the University of Minnesota. And excuse me, the reason why I'm running for Edina School Board is to bring a recent student's perspective to the board. As someone that's recently been in the public education system, I understand both the challenges and the successes we've had in Edina schools, from concerns with class sizes to the amount of stressors that are being put on our teachers, concerns about rollout of personalized learning. I'm really excited to bring a unique perspective to this board if I'm elected on November 7th. Additionally, I think it is really important that representation of all communities matter. Right now, about 33% of our students are students of color in the state. 3% of school boards are members of color. And I think it's incredibly important that we have representation for all of our communities, especially in this growing, more diverse world. What I like best about Edina Public Schools, and I had these teachers, are our teachers. Our teachers are incredible. They help you both prepare for post-secondary education, but also with so many life skills, and I'm so proud of the teachers I had here in Edina.
Is it my turn?
Thank you very much.
Great. Good timing.
So
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. I still
Glad you could join us.
Huffing from climbing up two flights of stairs.
We'll give you a little break, and we will defer to the next
Thank
candidate.
you.
We'll come back to you in just a minute.
Thank you.
My name is Faisal Deri, and I've lived in this neighborhood, part of Hopkins District, for about 16 years. Before 2 years ago, I moved to Edina. And the main reason I moved to Edina is because of the excellent education we have in Edina. As a father of 5 who could only afford to put my kids in a public schools, always throughout my life, public schools meant a lot to me because that's the only way I could have a fair education for my kids. What do I like about Edina Public Schools? I think some of the things that I like about Edina Public Schools is not only that we have the best hockey teams, although my kids do not play hockey teams, but it puts us on the map for being one of the best places to play hockey. But also it gives us some of the excellent education in the state. We have been leading education excellence in this state throughout the decades. And that was one of the reasons I chose mainly to move to Edina, so my kids can go to Edina Public Schools. So what do I bring on the table? Because a lot of times running for an office is not an easy. It takes a lot of time, dedication, and you have to be able to contribute something. So I have a skill set for the last 15 years. I worked one of the major public accounting firms. So I understand budget, I understand finance, I understand corporate governance, and I also understand policy setting. So from a board level, what you need is people that can understand governance, policy, and finance. So those are the skill sets I can bring to the table, and that's why I'm passionate about becoming a board member. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you ready, or would you like to?
No, I'm
Okay.
ready. Thank
So
you.
you're going to have 90 seconds to tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're running for the school board, and finishing with a sentence about what you like about the Edina Public Schools.
Great.
And
Okay.
please speak into the microphone.
My name is Erica Allenberg, and a little about myself. I think I have a unique educational background for running for school board and for some of the challenges we have right now. I have actually double major in history and African American studies from Indiana University, with a focus on the history and sociology of race relations in our country. And I think it gives me some educational background to help deal with some of the challenges that we're facing here in our school district and our community. I come by my passion for education honestly. I have two parents that are educators. One was a school teacher for many years in first grade and became a professor, and then my dad was a professor of education for 35 years. I've spent the last 13 years volunteering in our school district. I'm the host parent of an Edina ABC student. This is my second student that I've been host parent for. I'm a Girl Scout troop leader. I was the Creek Valley PTO president, and I want to be on the school board to help affect positive decisions for every student in our school district, whether I'll wrap up, 30 seconds left. What do I like about our school district? I really like, I feel that we have a sense of community in our school district, especially when you see tragedies sometimes that strike. Unfortunately, I think that we really come together as a community and focus on, that's the best of Edina that I see sometimes, and I would like to see us focus more on positive things and the best of Edina as opposed to negative things. Thank you.
Hi, thank you all for coming. Thank you for hosting this event. This is a great event, and really appreciate having one more opportunity to talk with folks. My name is David Goldstein. I am running for re-election to the school board. I first ran 4 years ago when my oldest had just graduated and my middle son was going into his senior year, and my daughter was just about to move into the high school. And I ran because, first of all, I'm very grateful for everything that this community and this school district has given to me and to my family. We've done wonderful things here, thanks to the contributions of people who came before me here and contributed to the school board and the school, and the support this community gives through their tax dollars and their hard work, their volunteering in the classroom and elsewhere. And it's been greatly appreciated, and I wanted to pay it back. And my youngest graduated in May, and I'd like to do another 4 years on the board because I think we do have a lot of work left to do, and I would appreciate that opportunity. I don't come here with any agenda other than to do what's best for all of our kids. What do I love about the Edina Public Schools? I love the involvement of the whole community, the love that everyone puts into doing the best for our children so that they can succeed and so that they can then pass it forward. It's been a privilege to be a part of it. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Fox and I'm happy to be here today. Thanks for hosting. I'm here because I want to help all of our kids. It's a pretty straightforward answer. So from my perspective, moving to the kind of community that we have here in Edina, my wife's been very active on the PTO for the OA Learning Center and the Race and Equity Task Force for the city, and I've been getting much more involved this year. And from the perspective of a board, I think that we need to have a board that's going to have a lot of different backgrounds and disciplines. Right now I serve as the CEO of a biotech company for kids with rare disease, so I work with children and foundations currently to make sure they have all the services they need. So when you look at what a board needs to do to make sure that all the kids in Edina have a great future and great opportunity, I think we have to build a really strong strategic plan. We built one in 2012 here in Edina, and that worked well through 2014, 2015. But we haven't revisited that in 3 or 4 years. So when all these different issues come up, whether they're around class sizes, whether they're around start times, whether they're around what opportunities and resources your children have in the classroom, it all rolls back to a strategic plan. So what I like to do from a governance perspective on the board, thank you, is to sit back and say, what does success look like for every single one of our students at the beginning of 2018? Then we lay that out over the sense of the year, over the course of the year, and see what resources can we provide, and prioritize those. What I love about Edina is the fact that everyone here tonight represents everyone in our community and how engaged everybody is for the betterment of our children. So I'm here to help and I'm here to serve, and thanks for having me here tonight. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ellen Jones. I've been in the community for 27 years. And my husband, Bob McElveen, and I have 3 kids. We raised them from early childhood education here all the way through high school. And I'm very proud that they ended up graduating from Edina High. And it's one of the things that I'm very proud of because and I'll answer the last question first. One of the best things about Edina was that it created kids that were not only academically capable of succeeding at the very highest levels in this country, but it made them compassionate people. I will never forget the teachers we had at Highlands Elementary School, teaching them compassion and how to be respectful young people. And that's kept with them throughout their lives. So that's one of the things that why I'm back here is because I want to make sure that all kids have that ability to not only have excellent academics, but also, those signs get so distracting. They not only have excellent academics, but I would be here to help that along. I've had a lot of experience in both policy making, working for the park board here, being on many different levels within the school district. So my interest is in children and how they develop. Thank you.
Okay, great. My name is Matt Laux. My wife and I moved here in 2004, although she grew up in the Twin Cities, so I had been around here prior to that. We have a first grader here in this building at Normandale, a fourth grader at Normandale, and a sixth grader who just started at Valley View. And then just a little bit about my background in the community. I help coach Edina basketball, which I'm not there tonight, Edina soccer, and Edina baseball. And then we also host interns at Normandale. We've had 2 at our house, and we will get 1 again at the beginning of the calendar year. A little bit about my background. I have an undergraduate degree and an MBA from the University of Chicago. I want to talk about kind of why I'm doing this and hit on both the work ethic, my interest in education, and then touch on politics. I graduated from the U of C in 3 years and played hoops. So for you hoop fans, I played hoops at the U of C. So I think that's some testament to my ability to work pretty hard. When I got my MBA, I got my CFA at the same time. And since I finished college in 3 years, I had 1 more year to play hoops. So I did it again because I like hoops. And then lastly, when I taught, I got my ESL license at the same time. So I come to it from the standpoint that I worked in the investment world for over 15 years. Then I went and got an ESL license because I wanted to work with kids of color who do not have some of the benefits that we all have. And I want to bring that to the board. And then last but not least, I'm one of the few candidates who is not involved with any political party. I don't think politics should be on the school board. I don't think it should be in the school. Thank you very much.
Hi. Thanks for inviting us. My name is Owen Michelson, and I think one of my dominant feelings today is I wish this were reversed and that I could be asking you all questions. I think I have a lot to learn and to listen. My wife and I have lived in Edina for 18 years, and we have 4 children, and 1 is through, and 3 are still in Edina. And to answer the last question first, I agree with Ellen. My children went to Highlands, and my children learned a lot about leadership and compassion and mutual respect and teamwork. And they're life lessons that I am so incredibly grateful, and I'd like to see that continued on throughout the years with the Edina schools. My central theme is I would like to have education first in the Edina schools and have a relentless drive for top education that's culturally sensitive, culturally affirming, yet challenging, brings out the best in everyone, that everyone becomes a winner because they've learned so much that they are absolutely equipped for life, for citizenship, and for work. So that's my central objective, and I'm real excited to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
Hello, thank you for having us. I'm Lisa O'Brien. I have lived in Edina for 21 years. I have 3 children, 2 at the high school. One's a senior doing her college essays right now, a 9th grader, and I also have a 5th grader at Concord. As many of you, I've been an active volunteer in all the schools through Art Adventure or Bravo or Media Center or Career Counseling Center, really getting to learn what happens in our schools on a daily basis. When I ran 4 years ago, I ran because I wanted to bring a different lens to the school board. I have a background in child development and child clinical psychology, a PhD from the University of Minnesota. I worked in pediatric psychology, doing evaluations with kids who were struggling and then coming into the classrooms and special education meetings and really working to get their needs met. I have also been on the board of Greater Minneapolis Crisis Nursery for 9 years now, I think it's 9, and working with the most vulnerable in our communities. So I really wanted to bring a lens of what is developmentally appropriate into those meetings and those decisions. Why do I like Edina? I love Edina. I'm passionate about Edina, and what I think is special about it is the dedication and the passion that the students, the parents, the community, and the staff have all around our central theme, which is our students and their growth and development. And so that's what makes Edina such a unique place to live.
Hello, I'm Chris Tischer. So as far as my background, I have an educational background in public administration and policy analysis. Professionally, I currently work at Thomson Reuters and working in a project management capacity. So I've had an opportunity not only from an educational standpoint to understand policy, but also working with stakeholders to build consensus and get things done. We have been a part of the Edina educational community for 6 years now. So initially, we were a part of the community as open enrollees for our daughter. She's been enrolled at Countryside Elementary ever since kindergarten. So we actively sought out participating in the Edina educational community based off of its reputation. And when we had the opportunity to move here, we did so based off of the engagement that we had with the other family members that were in our daughter's class. So we had an excellent experience. We really felt like even as not being residents of Edina, we were embraced by the rest of the education community, and that was something that we really loved and wanted to continue to be a part of. So since we've moved here, a little over 2 years ago now, I've had an opportunity to coach my daughter's soccer teams through Edina Soccer Association. And really what I wanted to do was to continue to get more involved in the community, to look for opportunities where I can have positive impact, not only on my children's lives, but all of the children within the community. And as far as the last thing, what I like most about Edina schools, I think I kind of hit that already. It's the community and that great sense of community that we have within the Edina educational system. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for taking the time to introduce yourselves and get grounded. We're going to now move into the 4 questions that everyone is going to ask, and you will again have 90 seconds to respond. And we will start at that end again. So the question that we're going to start off with is around test scores. So test scores have been widely discussed in our community, and specifically that reduced test scores are due to students of color who receive either free or reduced lunches, which is incorrect. This type of assumption would have meant that I, as a brown woman who never passed the entrance exam to Blake schools, would not have graduated in the top third of the class, nor, without having my ACT scores waived, would never have graduated from McAllister College. And in spite of having my GMAT scores, also graduated with my MBA from Metropolitan State University. And I wouldn't have the job that I have, nor would I be an active member of this community if we were to base everything solely on test scores. What will you do to stop these types of test scores assumptions from creating divisions within our school? And secondly, what other metrics will you utilize to measure the educational success in the Edina public school systems? And with that, we'll turn it over to Gabe to respond.
you know, I'm definitely not alone, that I'm disheartened that Edina has shot to the top of some of the national attention with just unfair attacks on teachers with linking, cherry picking very isolated test score data. But I think your question gets to a deeper point about the assessment and the qualifications of those test scores and what they tell us about our students. And I am someone that absolutely believes that there are so many ways for us to see how our students are performing. In one of my psychology classes at the U of M, we talked about how even some of these tests are designed so that students of different cultural backgrounds won't match their white students and their neighbors. And so I think it is really important that we look at a holistic way to measuring success, that we look outside of just test scores, that we're looking at writing, that we're looking at oral presentation. That's something that's really important in literature, especially, that we don't always see enough of. So I think that the first thing is, when the best way that we can stop these kind of divisive characteristics is to be honest and tell the truth, and to know that our students of color and families of color are not the reason at all for any sort of issues in our schools, and our schools are doing extremely well. And I am supportive of our teachers, and I am supportive of our families of color. Test scores are not everything, and the cherry picking has got to stop.
Thank you. This is a great question, and I mean, if I had the answer to it, I would be a very high-paid consultant right now. I think this is a question for our nation. I think it's going to take change. I mean, on a nationwide level, statewide level, and in the community. Unfortunately, for a lot of our schools, it's based on metrics, and until we can have a conversation at a statewide level and a nationwide level about these metrics, there's no way to completely disassociate from doing this testing. And so how do we change the conversation about what does this testing mean? And is it a fair way to assess students? And that has to be done on a lot of different levels, not just in the school level. We have to have a nationwide discussion about it and a statewide discussion about it. But absolutely, I agree with Gabe. Test scores are not I do not define my student by their test scores. I mean, we actually don't even talk or look at their test scores, because it's not a unilateral, it's one data point about my daughter and my son, and there are so many factors that go into testing. Are the tests culturally sensitive? Do they work? I mean, they just had to completely redo one of the tests because they aren't culturally appropriate for different communities. I think it's important, though, that we do have certain metrics to show growth. There is a disparity, there is an equity gap in our state, one of the worst of any states in our country. And we need to make sure that we are able to measure growth, that we're doing what we can for all communities. And how can we have a metric to show that we're showing some growth there? And I think that's an important discussion for us to have.
Thank you, and I believe that test scores is just a one indicator, and if test scores would be the most important test thing for child success, I don't think I would have been sitting here. Throughout my life, I have done well in test scores, and there are certain areas that I didn't do well. So test scores is just one component for us as an Edina residents to evaluate our schools. But there are a lot of other ways we can evaluate our schools, and one of those things is the perfect ACT scores that we have, which is leading in the state. Although it's highly coachable area, but I think it's a good indicator that our kids are learning. So what I would also say is that as a person of color, students of color have nothing to do with whether our test scores is going down or going up, because I believe today, math is a universal, and kids that are in the IT world and also in science, we hire from poor countries, and they do really well in math and science. So if socioeconomic reason is a reason for us to not do well in test scores, those kids who grow up in a very poor family, and I grew up in a very poor family, and I did well in math. So socioeconomic status is completely out of the way. Yes, it created some sort of tension in our community, and I think it's time for us to pass that and look at our schools and the excellent education we offer in a lens is that are we covering all our students? We have special needs students. We have students of color. We have all different types of students that are not sometimes doing well versus, when you compare it to other students. So we need to look at the bigger picture instead of details. Are we covering every single student that we have? I think that's the question that we need to ask. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Before, David, you respond, I'm just going to remind everyone that we have people with different hearing abilities. So please speak up and into the microphone so that everyone in the room can hear your answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Yell if I'm not talking loud enough. So great question, for which I don't have a really good answer. But I can start on one. First, we're not going to get rid of tests. They play a role. We need them when we're trying to figure out what school district we want to live in or how our district is performing. We need something that we can look to give us that information. When we're trying to see how our child's progressing, we're looking for some things that are, quote, more objective to give us some sense of how they're progressing. But they are of limited value, and we all have to make our own choices as to how we view success and how we view our children's success and how to encourage our children. And there are things that are a lot more important than test scores that we can observe when we're in close relationship with other people. Senses of humor, creativity, passion for learning, curiosity. These are all things that are far better indicators, I think, of ultimate success and the benefit you'll get out of education than a simple number. So how do we do that as a public school? I think the answer is to give teachers the resources and sufficiently small classes to allow them to get to know their students and their families and judge them and their aspirations and work with them accordingly. Thank you.
So, Jesse, thanks for sharing your personal story. That was touching. From the perspective of what every child needs to be successful, and the first part of the question was how do we address the divisiveness, if I'm correct remembering it. So to address the divisiveness, I've been walking around the community and knocked on over 3,000 doors in the past 5 weeks. Everyone at the door has a different viewpoint on what's going on in Edina, what's happening with test scores, who's affecting it, and why. The first thing to address the divisiveness and to bring us together is to find a commonality. A lot of times that means changing the conversation. Sometimes saying, what are you worried about with our school? What have your children seen? What do you want to see out of Edina for your grandchildren or for people that you know? So when you work toward finding a commonality that's going to have a positive outcome, it brings down that tension right away, and people start working together. On a board, you want to have leadership that understands numbers and understands what impacts are meaningful. So why didn't the reading scores drop dramatically in 10th grade if they're ESL kids that are affecting the scores? Because they're not. So you pick 1 or 2 numbers, you ground people, and you have a very productive, collaborative conversation. The second thing is test scores are only one item, and there are 3 things that I would think about. The first one is individual growth of the child as measured by their teacher and by what else they're learning in the classroom. The second one is a set of skills. So what is each child supposed to leave that grade with, and what makes them successful when they get out of high school? And the third one is an overall understanding of their grades in class. So those are scores that are meaningful and set by their teacher. So those are 3 different metrics that are worked on within the Edina public school system that aren't statewide tests. So if we're looking for ways to make sure we can measure our kids' growth and ability to succeed in the real world after high school, that's how to get there. And if we want to be one community, let's listen to each other, have board members that can set a tone, and get rid of divisiveness. Thank you.
So I think that this is one of the hardest questions because a similar question was asked at the Morningside Forum, and I remember sitting here thinking, wow, that is tough, because we don't want to distill down to one number what the worth of one person is. And that's what ACT scores do, that's what SAT scores, and many colleges are now saying, we really don't like that because that doesn't show what the whole person is. And so how I would address that, how would I would answer the question, and I think many of these, the former candidates, the prior candidates answered that, was I too would think that you you teach to each child, you raise expectations, and you diminish barriers to success. So what I am thinking is when you are in a class, when teachers are teaching, I think that they need to make sure that they get to know each child and teach to each child and teach compassionately and have high expectations, because divisions come up with lack of understanding and lack of connections. The other thing that I want to say, though, is to answer the second part about other measures, I agree growth is the thing that we should be measuring. I believe teacher evaluation is important, and I also think that student engagement is the other major thing that we need to, if my child is at school and is engaged, then they're learning, and it may not be showing up on the test. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to hit on three things, maybe 30 seconds apiece. First is to explain actually what these test scores are. B, to emphasize that they are only one component and we do really need to measure growth. And then B, talk about setting goals with students. So first on what the MCA is. It is only a bar. It does not measure growth. It only says whether or not students reach this bar. So that's one shortcoming. Another shortcoming, and the most important for somebody who's in the classroom, it does not inform how you instruct those kids because you don't get the result until the summer. And lastly, if anybody comes at you and talks about this achievement gap, just come right back to them and say the following. If you want the achievement gap to go away, it's actually pretty straightforward. Gather all the research that talks about the benefits of having spoken more than one language, go to the state and say there's all these benefits. We think every student should take the MCA in a language that's not their first. Poof. Okay? So that should shut it down. There definitely is various ways to measure growth. There's MAP tests, there's various summative assessments in the classroom to measure student growth. But the most important thing, this is my third point, we need to keep in mind we're trying to prepare these kids for the long haul, okay? So what are the character traits that you really want them to develop? Sit down with students at the beginning of the year and come up with goals. Perseverance, grit, integrity, passion. What are you, the student, going to do this year in these three areas? And monitor that. And then at the end of the year, you can say, yeah, you didn't reach this MCA goal, but we saw growth, and look what you did on these goals.
First off, we have had some declines in test scores, and I'm very sorry that some association to subgroups were made because I've looked at the numbers, and there's no group that could be associated with the decline of the test scores in some areas. Tests are a crude barometer of a narrow band of human success, and as such, they are a rough measure of how schools are doing, but that's it, because the purpose of public schools, of any school, is to teach the whole person. And there are multiple intelligences that we all have, and we stress more of an academic orientation in our schools. But a more meaningful measure would be to identify the level at which a person can achieve and have the student achieve to that level, rather than comparing the student to a larger group. While that some of that has to happen, success is really defined by how a student is achieving up to his or her capacity. And regarding divisiveness, I think one of the best things we could do for reducing divisiveness in the community is to solicit from as many people, particularly the major stakeholders of the parents, how they would actually like the schools to express education, what kinds of curriculum they could have, and address the curriculum needs and perceived needs of the community as broadly as possible. so that all of our students can succeed to the degree that they're capable of.
So some of these tests aren't going to go away. The MCAs are required. We have to do them. However, any test that we give is only as good as if it actually measures what we say it's going to measure. And so for everything that we do assess, we need to make sure that it measures what we think it measures. Not sure we always have tests that do that, or we think that they do. Secondly, these are only a snapshot of where your child is. If we never measure anything, you're never going to know if we have growth. We need a snapshot. But having said that, it's not just the test score, but how does the child approach the test? What do they think about? Do they think about it differently? When I was doing evaluations with kids, I used many different tests, IQ tests, achievement tests, all sorts of tests. It wasn't just the score that they got that was important to me. It was when I watched them and saw how they approached the things. Did they see it from a different way? Sometimes they had a unique way of looking at things that the test could not possibly measure, but I watched it and observed that. That's what our teachers get to do. They get to see our kids and how they approach things, so their teacher's viewpoint and observations are as important as those test scores. Secondly, I think test scores are really not an endpoint, but rather the beginning of a conversation. So when I have a child does a test score and I can look at it and go, oh, they did well here, but here's a section, that gives me an opportunity, sorry, I just created a new word, an opportunity to meet with a teacher and say, let's work together. Here's where I see it, where we are, here's where I think we should go, what suggestions do you have, and how do we do that forward?
All right, as far as the decline in test scores being associated with any individual metric or something that's happened, I don't know that there's been any sort of studies or in-depth studies to be able to point to one or even a couple of different issues causing the decline in any sort of test scores. At that time, or at the same time, what I'd like to say about that is I think we've lost focus of what the importance of these test scores are. We're so focused on what our ranking is based off of the test scores as opposed to how it's measuring the progress of our students and looking for that growth in the students. As Matt had said, the MCA tests are once a year, and we're not being able to have that opportunity to be able to take a look at that growth over the period of time for our students. And that's really what the focus of these tests should be, is to understand how we can improve and where our students need help and where we as a district can look to help those students out. So that's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Chris, we're going to keep you in the hot seat this time. Edina has not historically been equipped to track and support diverse students, teachers, and staff. And as a member of this community who has lived here since I was 12, I can tell you that the racism I've experienced and the issues with having a brother in a wheelchair was one of the reasons why I specifically chose not to go to Edina High School. What are your plans to support and uplift our diverse students, teachers, and staff so that multiple perspectives are heard and valued? And in this context, when we are talking about a diverse person, we are including but not limiting that definition to students who may identify as English as their second language, gender identity, race, and learning abilities.
So I think some of the work that we are doing as a school district already in the area of equity and diversity has been really great. And it's a great starting point. What I would say is that we still have ways to go, and specifically in regards to the diversity of staffing, teachers, administration, ensuring that we are getting those diverse points of view for our students. In order to be successful in the global community that they are going to be entering, they need to have those different viewpoints and understand how to think differently. And unless we're providing that diversity in the classroom, both in students and in teachers, then they're not going to have that worldview that they're going to need as they enter their continuing educational career and vocational careers.
Going this way? Just making sure. I want to make sure. Yes, we have started a great conversation of equity here, but I do not think we are anywhere far at our end goal in our journey. I have been to many different meetings with Shiraki Holly, and I've really resonated with his view of how do we create an opportunity or a culture of having students be able to have their voice and have it validated and encouraged for every student. And how do we create students who are welcoming of challenging their beliefs as well? We have to do that by modeling them, not only in our community, but in our teachers and our staff. So how do we get our teachers and staff to also recognize their own beliefs, their biases and concerns, and challenge their own beliefs in a way that's welcoming and warm, and not difficult, because we have to be able to for people to feel welcome to do that. We do need to do better at hiring staff that represents the families in our community. We have we have a little more diversity here, but generally speaking, when you look at our staff, it looks a lot like me. And so we need to work much harder on doing that. And are you about to raise that? Do I? Sorry, he's lifting, so I don't want to go to a next statement if you're gonna. And then also, how do we invite the community at large in to help to do that? As we try to get new, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. Sorry.
You can go ahead and finish that statement.
So as we are on our journey of hiring staff that better represent our community, if we have community members here who have expertise in different places, bringing them in to support us as we move forward in our journey is also important.
Edina schools have been doing a pretty good job of inclusion and have been focusing a great deal on letting a lot of voices be heard. And I think we could find strides, areas we could also do a little bit more of this. One thing that I think about is I think that there are some parents who feel that they're not always heard, and I would like to expand the voice and choice that parents could have for a wide variety of perspectives, curriculum, and I think that would make some groups feel more included. Another thing is I think that some folks have been feeling a little bit excluded because there is a certain tone in some of the classes with a political orientation, and I think more of a neutral sense would create a climate where people do not feel as uncomfortable. So I think we want to raise our sensitivity to that sort of issue. And I think we have been doing a good job of recruiting a broad faculty that represents a diverse community, but I think we could probably do more of that as well.
Well, I want to hit on, I guess, 2 points. One is kind of creating the right environment, and then the second is how do you try to recruit staff that reflects the students in the school. I guess on the first point, it's weird because I really think that parents have a tough time or a harder time trying to talk about these things than kids do. My own experience, for example, last year had 8-year-old kids, and they don't have a problem having, being able to talk about their race or what's going on at home or things like that. And I think parents sometimes are adults, and I'll speak for myself, who do not have the experience doing that, who did not do it as a kid growing up, don't feel great about leading that. So I think there should be a fair amount of training in terms of how do you create an environment where every student has a chance to have their voice heard. Because at the end of the day, that really is what they want. They want to be able to say their own name, talk about their own experiences, and have everybody else in that class be able to hear what they're saying and to respect what they're saying and understand what they're saying. So creating that environment where every voice is heard, I think, is critical. And once you can do that, I think the students can kind of self-police that. So if they see other students step out of line, they're kind of like, no, that's not how we do it here. So I think that's the critical piece. It has to start with the adults in the classroom, but you want to get to a point where the students kind of self-police. And then just on the recruiting side, I think, yeah, you should make a point to try to find staff that reflects the students who are in the school.
Okay, well, I'll start by just saying I think that in order to get what you're after.
Ellen, I'm going to ask you to make sure you stay with the microphone and speak up, please.
This is much better. I can even hear it. It's reverberating. Okay. I think the thing that, first thing, the question is, you need to get someone on the board who actually values these goals. And so that when we are creating policies, those goals are going to be part of the policies. And this is something that is important to me. And so I would say, yes, you want to make sure you vote for the school board members that will be putting this as their top priority. So, and I'm one of those. Secondarily, I have said this before, but I do think that All for All has excellent goals, but they're mostly goals that have not been worked on hard enough or reviewed to find out if they're effective. I feel strongly that we need to have not just say that these are our goals, but we need to work toward them. And we need to review what we're doing and possibly look for better practices that are being done around the country that creates equitable environments for all. And so finally, I'll just say, creating equitable environments that permeate the whole system from pre-K through hiring practices, through how we budget. Those are all things that we need to look at. Thank you.
Okay. Can everybody hear me in the back? I have a tendency to mumble a little bit. Okay. So there are three things that I would hit on here. Again, I think the first one is a general sensitization and normalcy of what differences mean. So I think the Early Learning Center does a great job of having parents come in that have different backgrounds and provide different lunches or food or cultural discussions around what happens in their own home country. My son came home very proud from there one day and said, "Dad, I was really excited. I taught somebody a new word in Spanish." I told him he speaks Vietnamese. That being said, he was still proud of it. So the idea that you have that overall, acceptance of differences and understanding is really important. The second one is thinking about what we're teaching in the classroom. So having part of the curriculum be focused on understanding what globalization means is important. I went to school in Connecticut. I went to Wesleyan University, which is nicknamed Diversity University, and I lived in New York, DC, Zurich, Switzerland, Ohio, Connecticut, and now Delaware, and now here. I have roots here in Edina. I'm not leaving. I'm really proud to be part of our community, but I think having that global background and understanding really is important so a board member can look and see what our students need when they get out of Edina High School to understand how they're going to compete in the global economy. The third one is seeing the future and seeing what opportunity looks like is really important. After the first two debates, I had people in our community reach out to me via email and say, "Matt, you mentioned public-private partnerships. I ran a science lab for 30 years at Medtronic. I'd be happy to have all kinds of kids come in and see that. I'd be happy to come into the schools and teach this." We have a wonderful community here, and for every kid to be able to see what that future can look like and what role they can play in it is really important. So those are the three things: the soft sensitization, the curriculum and learning, and then having an exposure to the real-world setting. And those will help our students feel proud and learn. Thank you.
I think a good first place to start is for every person who wants to serve on the school board to explicitly affirm their personal commitment that every child is welcome in our schools, regardless of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity. That's the first place to start. Secondly, for every person who's running for this position to affirm that for all of those kids, we will do everything we can to make sure that their needs are met, and that we do the best we can to give them a good education. Beyond that, it is important that our curriculum include subject matter that allows every person to have some knowledge of their cultural heritage, as well as other people's cultural heritages, their literature, their history, have exposure to that in a meaningful way. It is important that our faculty reflect the diversity of our community. It is important that our administration reflect the diversity of our community. It is also important that we be intentional about all of this. None of it just happens. I've heard a lot of nonsense about being colorblind in this election. Colorblind means we favor white people. If you want to do what's right in terms of moving toward diversity, we recognize what we have in common, we recognize what is different, and we figure out how to live with each other. But turning a blind eye to it is just turning a blind eye to change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. During this election, if I learn one thing, I've learned the beauty of our diversity. As someone like me who speaks 3 different languages and has working knowledge of additional 2 languages, I've traveled around the globe. And one thing in Edina we need to recognize, diversity brings a strength for our kids because they will need to compete in the global economy. And you want someone on the board that understands the advantage for understanding global culture. What brings every corporate America today has branches or subsidiaries in anywhere around the world you can think of. So that is a huge strength that we have in Edina. 50 years ago, probably I would not have been sitting here running for an election. But today, thank God that because we have that diverse population, I can do that. So as I knock doors, I've went to some of the most gated communities, and I've also went to communities that look like me. So when you hear 90% of the issues are same, we're only maybe different about 15 or 10%. So it's our goal as a board members, as a leaders, to ensure that this is a very critical issue. It's a very sensitive issue, that we do not politicize this issue. When I was a young kid growing up in Africa, we used to say, if 2 giant elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. So we need to understand that we need to take care of the welfare of our kids while we're talking about the differences of political differences we have. Sure, we have political differences, but those political differences also is strength because we bring different ideas to the table. So whether you're left-leaning or right-leaning, it doesn't matter. If you come to the school board, you bring a passion to advance the learning and academic excellence of our kids. I think that's where we need to start first. Thank you.
For me, I think one of the most important things is to recognize that our board probably doesn't have all the answers, and that the first thing we need to do is open up the question to thought leaders in the diverse communities to come to the board and give us your recommendations for how we can lift up diverse communities. Because when you sit in a vacuum and try to come up with answers without engaging diverse communities as to how we can help you, we might come up with a lot of things that we think are great answers, but they're not going to be effective. So I think the first thing we should do is actually talk to diverse communities about how can we help you, and be humble about the fact that we might not know the answers, and start there, and then process those answers and utilize your recommendations, because I think that's probably going to be where we find our best answers is from the communities themselves, not from us. I absolutely agree. We have to recruit more staff and teachers from diverse communities themselves. I heard a story through one of my door knocking sessions of, or actually a meeting I was at, of a family of color who was saying at the beginning of the year, he said, "Mommy, do you know what color face my teacher is going to have?" And it was just such a poignant moment, because all this kid wanted was a teacher that looked like him. And if we don't realize that kids learn from teachers that look like them, that they can resonate with, we just need to realize, we also need to realize that our teachers of color and stuff might not want to come to our community unless we provide a support system for them. So we have got to work on that. So those are 2 things I would recommend. Thank you.
This is something that I've lived with in this community. I was adopted at birth by 2 white parents, and we moved immediately to Edina. And we were one of the few families where my parents open enrolled me out of Concord to go to Minneapolis public schools. I didn't understand. I said, these are my neighbors. We live here. I want to go here. And it wasn't until later my mom said, we were scared. We were scared about how you might be treated or how you might feel as one of the few students of color. And so over the years, as a teenager, I actually said, I want to go to Edina, and so we changed course, and I was very happy with my decision. But this is something I've definitely lived as someone here in this community. And so I think that it's really important that we have those voices on our school board. Additionally, I think it's on school board members to reach out to community members. I've been to school board meetings since January, and of course, everyone that comes to school board meetings' voice is important, but there's a lot of voices that aren't there. Perhaps they work 2 full-time jobs. Perhaps they have been so frustrated with the system, they're not going to come to board meetings. We need to actively reach out to all of those groups of people. I really believe in racial equity impact statements. Right now, in our board process, we talk about personalized learning and school start and end time, and then there might be a footnote about kind of the updates on equity efforts. That should be something that we're checking in along the way, because it's something that we really need to be holistic about. And lastly, as other candidates have said, it's not just about hiring more staff of color. We also need to retain staff of color. I think that we need to do a better job at supporting our staff of color. We've had staff of color that have left our community because they don't feel welcome. So racial equity impact statements, hire, retain more staff of color, and making sure that we're reaching out to those communities that are often not heard.
Welcome, Chad.
Hi. We were at Cub Scouts carving, well, thankfully not carving pumpkins, decorating them, so there were no knives involved. And my apologies for being late. I'm the Cub Master down the road, so hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I appreciate your patience.
When we get to you with the next question, I'll explain the ground rules for you. I'm going to ask that everyone holds their applause, please, until the end of the debate, while, or I shouldn't even say debate, conversation that we are having. This isn't about one particular candidate. This is the opportunity to hear from everyone. So please hold your applause to the end. Chris, I'm going to come back to you for the third question. One of the latest buzzwords in education is personalized learning. What does personalized learning mean to you, and what changes should be made to the current curriculum to leverage personalized learning and close the achievement gap?
All right, thank you. So what personalized learning means to me isn't necessarily ensuring that we have an individual teacher for every student. It's not realistic. But what it does mean to me is having the opportunity for the teachers in our classrooms to be able to work with the students to understand how they learn. Everybody learns differently, and if we can make the efforts to remove the obstacles from our students as to how they learn, to ensure that they are getting the best out of the material that is being presented to them, that's what personalized learning means to me. From a curriculum standpoint, I don't know that I have an answer there, but what I would say is from a resourcing standpoint, I think we need to focus on working with our teachers and finding out where can we best apply resources so that, is it more paraprofessionals? Is it more teachers' aides? Is it more technology in the classroom to allow them to have that more individual engagement with the students to, again, find out how they learn so that we're able to give them the resources so that they can be successful?
Yes, personalized learning is a buzzword. And I think it may mean something different to every single person that hears it. So our old curriculum, or when I went to school, everybody got the same instruction, everyone got the same homework, everyone gets the same test, whether you know the material or don't know the material or not. What we found is that maybe works for a very small proportion of our population, but not most kids. So we have some kids who are left behind. Something's too difficult, they're missing the instruction. Some kids already know it, and they're sitting and waiting. So how do we adapt the instruction to meet the kid instead of making the kid fit the instruction? And so that, to me, is what personalized learning is how do we adapt the system to meet the children where they are? One of the ways to do that is to create an opportunity for at least one person every year, one adult who really knows that child. And hopefully that person follows them over time. But the one thing that helps students grow is actually having somebody that knows them really well and cares about their growth. So that is one thing that we really need to do with personalized learning, is how to tailor those people with those skills to each child. Getting to know the child where they are, setting benchmarks for where they need to go, and following up and making sure they're actually there, and providing services and support for the teachers to do that. And then the second part was, I'm sorry, I was trying to write it down, change to curriculum to close, I'm sorry.
Personalized learning is a pretty exciting development in modern education right now, and I think the faculty at Edina Public Schools are doing a pretty creative job, with a pretty exciting job. I really like how flex time is being used to address the individual needs of students, whether it's collaborative time, whether it's one-on-one, or whether it's individual time. I think that's an example of a great execution on this new model of personalized learning. And as personalized learning meets the issues of the achievement gap, one thing I'd be excited about doing is having more RTI interventions done for reading. RTI has been proven to be an effective strategy for reading remediation. It's not just for kids of color. It's for any kid who's not performing well in, say, reading. Another thing
Owen,
is,
I'm going to have you hold on. There's something wrong with your mic that's giving a lot of feedback, so we're going to ask you to use the mic.
okay. Where was
Much
it?
better.
Orton Gilling, RTI, thank you. RTI, that to apply RTI to meet the needs of the kids where they're at. And another intervention I think would be helpful in the spirit of personalized learning would be to apply Orton Gillingham reading techniques at Title I instead of in remediation. So get the kids early on in reading difficulties and give them a strong base for reading. We've had two of my children have had reading problems, and early intervention is very important. And whether it's kids of color or kids who are just not reading well, it's very important to address that early on.
Oh, and you can hold on to the mic for you and Lisa. I think we're going to stop using that microphone.
Okay, so I guess while this buzzword seems some people have a tough time being able to define it, I think it's actually pretty easy to say. It's not easy to do, but all it is being able to teach well. And so what that means is understanding all the students that you have. At the beginning of the year, I always have a tough time. There's a lot of things you got to do at the beginning of the year, but the biggest thing you have to do is put in the time to get to know all these kids. How many kids do they live with? Who do they live with? What kind of books do they like to read? What kind of sports do they like to play? All of these things help you get to know the student, but it also allows a student to know that you care about them, so that when you get to the point of preparing a plan, you're able to say, okay, there's a lot of different ways that we can get all these students who have different needs and are at different abilities to our end goal. If you were to take, actually this is an interesting thing to do, take a language arts state standard in third grade, whatever, 3.111, and if you were to compare it to fourth grade, fifth grade, and sixth grade, a lot of times the standard does not change much. It might change by 1 or 2 words. So these things, regardless of the ability that the students are at, you have the ability to, based on the books that they like to read, get them to the standard that works for them based on their reading level or math level. It's also important to know what personalized learning is not, and it is not just wasted time on a computer, okay? If that were the case, then we would just do all classes online. Like, there's a lot to be said for struggling with the material at your level, and then I think one thing that would be, I think, a huge success for the school is to really push writing more. I think at the end of a day, you should be able to write, today I learned this, and this was one struggle, and that would have then you'd have a journal at the end of the year of all the things that you learn. I think that would be a great way to make it more about the students.
Okay, so for me, this never sounds loud enough. Okay, can you hear me? Okay. For me, personalized learning was explained when I went to the PTO meeting at Southview, and it was explained by showing me that the teachers there are giving students options, several options in each classroom, per whatever content level it is. So they had the option to work with a teacher, work in a group, or work on their own. And so they had more control over the theory goes that they would have more control over their pace and content, and become true learners, and not just subject being taught, but they would be in control over the learning. That would mean that they would be more engaged, and hopefully then they would grow. When I was there and I heard this, several things struck me, and I understand that this is being piloted and is not necessarily going to continue. But what struck me was a lot was being asked of the teachers. That many levels were being taught in one classroom. It struck me that we were not developing any metrics to find out of whether or not this new system was being successful, and that concerned me as well. Because if we're not measuring success, but we're going all out into a program, I am concerned that we're throwing away what's good in our program by creating something new that might not be effective for anyone. Thank you.
So I was speaking last Tuesday in Boston at a personalized medicine conference for my company, and I said in front of everybody, we need to find the right drug for every student. And after everybody realized what I said, I'm sorry, I'm running for school board. I meant patient. The point that I'm making there is that when you think about every individual, whether it's medicine or whether it's in the classroom, what you want to think about is better, not more. Better is what matters. So from the perspective of better, you don't want your GT kids having 10 extra classes. You don't want your kids in the middle area having extra work to do at night to help them catch up. You want to find better work and more meaningful work. From that perspective, it means what kind of resources can the board and can the administration and school district provide? I'm going to go back to that comment I made earlier about a strategic plan. If we step back in January, if I'm on the board, what I would ask for is to say, we have kindergarten to 12th grade, and we have personalized learning and individualized learning modules and metrics across every single one of those 13 years. What are we doing that is outside of the state requirements? What works? What doesn't? What does it cost? What does success look like? Ask for a report at the end of the first quarter. Then the board can hold the administration accountable. The board can look at what works and what doesn't, and the board can ask more questions and say, by the end of the second quarter of the year, this is what I do on the boards that I sit on now. At the end of June, what do we need to do to make sure that the students are all served? That the teachers come back to us and say, I'd love to do this in the classroom, but I can't, so I'm giving them a Chromebook. We would have that overview and that insight at the board level and administration level to make those changes and make those resources there for a Southview for personalized learning efforts or for any student that needs it. So again, I think in order to meet these needs of all of our students, we need to step back, say what does success look like, and how does the board make sure those resources are there? Thank you.
The best explanation I've received of personalized learning came from a Cornelia teacher who told me to think about it this way. The traditional model is the teacher has his or her lesson plan, goes through material for the whole class, comes to a quiz or a test, gives the quiz or the test, everybody takes it, moves on to the next part of the lesson plan. Personalized learning, by contrast, is you can pace the material more for different students, and you can have students demonstrate their mastery of the material in different ways, maybe doing a video or a project instead of taking a test. So that's how I understand personalized learning at the moment. That said, and this is, I'm not happy saying this, but after 4 years on the board, I still don't have the best idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about personalized learning. We have not defined it well. And beyond that, I'm afraid that we've still only heard half the story. We've heard a lot from the teachers who've been able to work successfully with personalized learning or support it, but we've heard much less from those teachers who see negatives to it or have concerns about it. For example, a teacher a week or so ago told me that she was concerned that that some schools were getting less participation in STEM programming because personalized learning was making it more complicated for those students to successfully participate in STEM classes. So the bottom line message is I don't think we have a clear definition yet of what we're talking about, and I don't think we've fully figured out what it looks like implemented, and that's a concern.
Thank you. So I would say if we want to define the word individual learning from a personalized learning and ask teachers, we may get 10 different answers if you ask 10 different teachers. Always I'm interested about the implementation. You know, we can define what it means personalized learning, but how can you implement? That's what I always think about. So I would give you a quick story, and I think the best way I define it is what I learned in my middle school from my teacher who taught me drawing. And my first job, I was one of the best to draw a process flow chart because what I learned in my middle school. So I was terrible at drawing at that time. So she came to this class one day and said, from today on, we would only evaluate and test kids who make progress. And we will report that to your parents on a monthly basis. As someone who was raised by single mom, I never wanted my mom to get a report that was negative. So I said, what can I do to show that I am good at drawing? And she said, the best student and the worst student in the class all can show a progress. So it would only be defined how you progress. So that teacher challenged some of the best and excellent drawers in the class, and also she challenged someone like me who didn't do well in drawing. So what I did is from that day on, I spent at least an hour or two every single day in my life drawing so that at least my mom can get that report that I was making progress. And at the end of that year, I was at least above average. So that's how we want to define personalized learning, where we meet every student where they are. So those who are above grade level, we need to meet them at there. Those who are below grade level, we need to meet them in there as well. Thank you.
So Chad.
Oh, sorry.
Hi.
Hi. So I didn't want to. Hi.
So we're going to actually give you 2 questions.
Oh, good.
Okay.
That's fantastic.
First, we want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself.
Oh,
so you're going to get a minute and a half to actually tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're running for school board, and finish with a sentence of why you like or what you like about the Edina Public Schools. And then after that, we'll let you answer about personalized learning.
Oh, sounds good. Okay, thank you. So I'm Chad Bell. Hello. I'm obviously talking too close to the microphone.
Actually, we want you to talk close to the microphone because we have
better?
people. Yes, thank you.
This is my second tour of duty in Edina. I lived here for about 6 years right out of college when I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. Sort of figured it out, moved away for a few years. My wife and I got married and moved back in 2005 before our first daughter was born. And I have 2 kids in the school system. My daughter Olivia goes to Southview, she's in 7th grade, and my little guy Jackson is in 2nd grade at Concord. I'm really just a dad running for school board. That's essentially what I do. I mean, I have a job, but fundamentally, I've coached a lot throughout the years, whether it's my daughter or my son. I've been involved with, volunteering in the school, like a lot of the folks up here have. And you get to know a lot of people, and you really kind of fall in love with the schools and just what you get from the kids and the energy. So my background is in business. I've been with a fairly number of large companies over the last 20 years. I have a master's degree in business. I currently run innovation for Blue Cross out in Egan. So my background is sort of innovation and strategy. I like solving complex problems. I find that to be a lot of fun, and I think that's something that I could hopefully bring to the board. And so, what I like best about the Edina Public Schools has been just the energy that I've gotten in my experiences with my kids have done. Whether it's their teachers or their friends, it's always been just a positive vibe, and it's just always been a very good feeling for me. And so I'm proud to send my kids to the schools here, and I look forward to them progressing along and having a great experience to end out as well. Okay, so moving on to the question. So I had a conversation with a teacher this summer about personalized learning. She was actually helping my son, who is in a lot of intervention programs. And she's a wonderful person. She teaches 1st grade at Concord. And she was saying that the biggest challenge that she's had with personalized learning is she didn't feel she had enough training to do it properly. And so that's a sample size of 1. So, but it was interesting conversation. She's a very dedicated person who really kind of she's just so great with the kids. I mean, I can't say enough good things about her, but it was interesting the way she was talking about just this feeling of frustration maybe that didn't have enough training behind it. But what I would say is the best example I have of personalized learning is actually what my son has gone through, because he's probably been a good example of it. He's in a lot of intervention, and the reason why it's gone well is it's been a partnership between the teacher and the parent to understand what's best for the kid, and then giving the kid the best solution. And so I would talk a lot about this Venn diagram between teacher, schools, families, and community, and there's intersection in the middle. I think it's important that the teachers and the students working together to figure out what's the best way to work with said individual. And I think when they can do that, that's their best chance to succeed. But I do agree with a lot of what folks have said up here. It's a great sounding term, personalized learning, but in the end is what kind of results are we driving for the students? So then finally on the achievement gap, my question really is, where are places where they have had success closing the achievement gap, and what are they doing? Who can we learn from? I think it's, in some ways, let's continue to challenge ourselves to find ways where we can improve performance and make sure that the people we're serving are getting the best experience possible, and never really settling for that we've crossed the finish line. I think it's always something you're chasing. So thanks.
Thank you. I think I understand personalized learning, what it means in theory. My son is a perfect example of how personalized learning could be effective. He has a very severe learning disability and he can't write. So for him to show competency, he'll never be able to write to show as smart as he is. He could do a video, he could orally do a test, but he'll never be able to write up to his ability. So I can absolutely see how personalized learning could be very effective for students like my son to show different ways of competency. But if we want it to work, we have to resource it appropriately. We can't have one teacher with 30 students asking them to do 5 different lesson plans, to have students do different competencies. I just don't think it's realistic, and all the teachers I've spoken to have said that to me. And that's a sample size of maybe 25. It's still not probably statistically valid, but it's still a large sample size. I actually do have concerns about if personalized learning can do anything with the equity gap. There was a study by the RAND Corporation that does educational research, and they actually said for the students that require remediation, personalized learning actually is worse for those students, because if you think about giving kids, pacing kids, state standards require you to get through curriculum in certain periods of time. And if you're giving kids time to pace themselves, the kids that are going to get left behind are those students that need the most time. And so they've shown that personalized learning actually is least effective for those that need it the most. So that's just one data point to think about. Thank you.
I see some of the goals in theory of personalized learning as empowering, engaging, and making sure that students are empowered, engaged, and successful. But my kind of analogy right now is we're in the personalized learning pilot car right now, and the check oil, engine, and parking lights are on. And so there are some things that we really need to focus here on improving with personalized learning. I have concerns about the technological usage in the classroom, the student self-pacing, the impact it might have on gifted and talented programming. There's just so many questions we have, and we can't move further with it until we can answer those questions. It was another candidate brought up, what are the ways that we can close that achievement gap? There were 2 large studies done in California, and they found that a reduction in class sizes shrank the achievement gap by 50%. And so I really believe that we should be focusing more of our energy on ways we can shrink our growing class sizes. A teacher that has a class of 34 for their physics class at the high school 4 to 6 times a day will not be able to build those individual connections with students. Having those smaller class sizes, at least in the core academic realms, are ways that students of color and students that might not otherwise succeed will have that opportunity. And so I really do believe that on our kind of mission to ensure individualized attention for all students is that we really need to focus on how can we build more connections between the teachers and the students. And that focus is less about technology and more about class size reductions and more times that our teachers can interact directly with our students.
So we have about a half an hour left, and the last of the 4 prepared questions really dives a little bit more into race, and we've gotten quite a few no cards on race. But we've also gotten some other ones that I kind of call lightning round questions. So I'm going to reduce the time to a minute, and I'm going to pose some questions to you guys that I think are going to be really quick At least I hope they are. And I want to give enough time to address race related to education. So with that, I'm going to go back and start with Gabe. We're going to go down to 1 minute. And we're going to start with a really easy softball question. Do you support school choice vouchers? Why or why not?
No, I do not support vouchers for charter schools or private schools. With the scarcity of resources, when the public or government subsidizes these programs, it hurts the institutions of traditional public schools. As a candidate for school board, I need to look out for the fiscal responsibility of our school district. Any candidate or cause that advocates for the expansion of charter or private school programs is advocating for fewer dollars in Edina public schools. So my answer is no.
No, and I can't say it any better than Gabe did. So no.
I'm also a no. I would say that, you know, Edina has a terrific school system, and we have a great resource here, and we should focus on spending our money and resources to make it, you know, it even better. I don't think going down the route of vouchers is in our best interest at all.
I would absolutely say no, and I would add also the main reason that some parents, you know, like to get vouchers or send their kids to charter schools is because they may not have a confidence in our public schools. So we need to make sure that trust and confidence, that we bring that trust and confidence, so there would be no need for vouchers and other different schools. We need to make sure that we have strong, well-performing public schools. And so someone like me could, you know, have all my kids can go through the public school. So for me, it's absolutely no.
Public education is the foundation of our democracy. It's where our children learn how to be good citizens and where they acquire the knowledge that they need to act wisely. It is where different people with different ideas are able to come together and talk intelligently and learn that you can disagree with someone without them being the enemy, and that we can work together. It's fundamental. Vouchers destroy public education. I am absolutely opposed to them.
No. What I'd like to say to follow up from that is we lose about 15% of our students every year that go to other districts, and then we have 15% on average come in from open enrollment. So for everybody here, I think it'd be interesting to us to really delve one level deeper and figure out why we're losing that 15% of students. Some might be for religious schools, some might be for language immersion, and some might be for personal preference of just being in a smaller setting. But either way, my answer is no, but I do think we can do a little bit of a better job of understanding our community and retaining our students here in Edina, so that way we make the most use of our levy and all of our resources for all of your kids. Thank you.
Absolutely no.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that I wanted to teach and why I want to be on the board is because I think, as David said, public education is a bedrock of the United States. It's the best thing that we can do for our kids. So I'm a big fan, and I think we need to do the best job that we can with our public schools. To the degree you start going down the private path, it turns into a case of who has money and resources and who does not.
We have 2 children who are dyslexic, and we've had 40 kid years in the Edina public schools, and when we found out that 2 of our kids were dyslexic, it was actually more fitting for them, at least one of them, to go to Eagle Ridge. And so we had a couple of our kids go to Eagle Ridge for 7 years, a total of 7 kid years. And that was helpful for them for that period in their lives. And I think some choice with school is actually effective. And I think that a model can be worked out that doesn't destroy the integrity of public schools. Public schools are a foundation for democracy. And it is absolutely imperative that we support compulsory public education unless another system is possible. So I'm open to vouchers.
So I went to, can you hear me? So I went to private school my whole life, all through graduate school. I've never attended not a public school. I would say no. We need to support the public school education. But I will agree with Faisal that in order to do that, we need to make sure that the public school education that we're providing is trusted by our community. And so we need to really focus on building that trust and making sure we are providing the services that we need for our students. So I guess the short answer is no.
I would say no as well. You know, anything that we're doing as a community needs to be to enhance the education that we're delivering from a public school standpoint. You know, not everybody has the opportunity to attend private schools, and taking away resources from our schools only hurts those individuals that are continuing along the public education path. So I definitely no.
See, that wasn't that hard. This question is specifically for Lisa and David, a topic that I saw quite a bit on Nextdoor, school start time. What would you have done differently if you could do this over with voting, the issue, community comments? Lisa, you want to go first?
So funny you should mention that. We just had a meeting prior to this talking about how did that process go and what would we like to do differently. One of the things that I think went wrong with the previous process was at the end, at the last minute, the board got in a position where we were asked to fix it at about 11 o'clock at night or later. I can't remember. And so that put the board in a place that wasn't our job. We weren't there to fix it. What will I do? What do we, and what have we discussed to do next time? One of the things we're looking to do is a lot of the outstanding questions that weren't answered the first time, create the list. What were those? What did the task force want to know that they didn't have? Getting that information up front, bringing that forward. The next thing also is going out to the community and saying, what are the things that weren't brought up the first time that you need to know about so we actually can hear you before we come to you again with options? I'll let you do part.
One last quick question as a follow-up, Lisa. So does that mean that school start time is coming back on the agenda for discussion and community input?
Yes, we promised that the last time, that was a one-year plan because it does cost us money, but we want to make sure that we're doing it in the right way and that all community members had an opportunity to voice their concerns and what the impact of those changes are on them. So yes, it is coming forward again.
So what did we get wrong? Pretty much everything. The board did not give adequate instruction to the task force. We did not get sufficient input from the community. We did not require the administration to answer our questions and your questions. We allowed ourselves to be in a position where we had to make a decision under a deadline. And then when we made the decision, we allowed the administration to change the decision we made. So it was perfect game. What are we going to do right this time? Well, we're not going to make any of those mistakes. And as Lisa said, we have already started. There will be community input very early on, and it is my hope and belief that that input will be very open-ended. So before we've narrowed down any options, there will hopefully be a chance for the community to speak as to what your priorities are and concerns and what kind of process you'd like to see. And then we will be much more thorough and transparent in how we get to a final solution.
And when you said you hope that the community has an opportunity to speak, do you mean that we will have an opportunity to speak?
I'm just one little old board member. So, you know, if my vote will be yes, and I'm reasonably confident my colleagues' votes will be yes on that too, but I can't speak for them.
Okay. Final 1-minute question that we're going to ask, and I apologize to everyone that we aren't going to be able to get to all of the questions, but I'm going to encourage you to keep reaching out to the candidates. A lot of them have information out there, outside on tables, and if they're not out there, please introduce yourself and get to know them. As special education funding continues to decline and the number of students with needs continues to increase, what specifically will you do to make sure we have enough support in the classroom supporting these students? Chris, I'm going to have you answer that one first.
That's a difficult question. Not in the sense that we absolutely need to make sure that all of our students are being served, and especially the students that have additional needs. So what I think that we need to do from a board perspective would be to take a look at where we have opportunities within the budget to be able to potentially reallocate resources to ensure that those services are being delivered. Additionally, I think we need to have further and more in-depth discussions with the parents of the individuals that have those special needs to find out, where are we not serving you? Where are you having difficulty getting access to services? What services don't you have access to, period? And make sure that we as a board are looking at ways that we can allocate resources to be able to deliver on those.
Yeah, a lot of the special education funding is driven by the state. We don't have a lot of control over that. But having said that, we provide a lot of different services, interventions that we have done for a long time, but we don't do a good job as a system to actually see how effective they are and for which students they're most effective. So we need to do a better job of actually assessing whether they're working and doing that in partnership with the families and the teachers. So in that way, if there are services that we're providing that aren't very effective, but we're funding them, and there's something else that would be better, we need to make sure we're allocating those services properly. In addition, we also need to make sure we're not just looking at educational needs, but whole child needs of the special education, children with special education, including mental health and supporting the family. And so how can we partner with other community services or members or groups that will help support those needs, which maybe we can't find resources for, but we can partner with someone to do that with us.
I'd like to look into the revenue models a little bit more, but as a father of 2 children who qualified for special education, I have a strong feeling about this, that I wonder why we spend $2 million in outside consultant fees when seemingly a good portion of that money could be directed straight to education. I would also like to make a case to the community that perhaps some sports facility funding would be better directed actually at education. And sometimes I look at the new athletic fields south below the hill at the high school and wonder, could that have been applied to education, in this particular case, special education? So I think we could make a case to the community. This is not something that we would just, a decision we would make as a board, but solicit input and support from the community on the allocation of funds in that way.
So I've got a few thoughts on that, really just based on my own experience in schools where there is a high percentage of students who have IEPs. And I think the best thing you could do, given the constraints of a budget, this thing is not sound as nice as it did before, is staff-wide training. Like, how to identify students with emotional behavior disorder or ODD or anxiety or things like that. And that's the whole staff, not just licensed staff, but support staff and paras. A lot of times, students who have some of those challenges may gravitate to some of those support staff. So having the whole staff trained to identify them. And then the number of special ed licensed staff is probably not going to change, so giving them professional development opportunities to train then the rest of the staff on accommodations that you can do, interventions that you can do in the class, so that to the degree you have students with challenges in your class, you are A, better able to identify them, and then B, have some tools to advocate on their behalf.
So I base all of my decisions on what's best for the child. So when I think about this question, I'm going to be deciding how do we allocate resources, looking at each child and saying, okay, what can we do that would be best for the child? I would be looking at how we can create communities both within Edina, but also among other cities, so that we can collaborate with other cities. I would look at Also, a nationwide search on how other communities are serving the needs. My nephew has dyslexia. He went from 30% reading all the way to 90% in a month in a Bethesda public school. I know we're not doing that here. I don't know why. So we need to look at national research. But also, I would create a parent group that would advocate for public school funding at the state. And that's what I think is important too. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is an important question. I think there are three things that come to mind. The first one, as I mentioned earlier, that strategic plan. So again, until we step back and look at what resources we're spending on athletic fields or consulting or other services, we don't know what our gap is. So if we step back in January and say, as a district, here's how much money we have, here's what success looks like for every category of students, we'll find what solutions we have. The second one is thinking overall about exactly what the family needs. I work a lot with families that have any kind of cognitive decline, whether it's caused by epilepsy, caused by autism, caused by other severe neurological diseases. And if you're able to help educate the families at home a lot more often, they're able to help have the students ready for school, and the growth path comes from having a good back and forth feedback loop with the family at home. And the third thing is thinking about, as I mentioned before, public and private partnerships. I work with epilepsy societies, autism foundations. There are a lot of groups that would come into a school and help with these children, whether the start of the school day or after the school day at no cost to Edina, and I would work on those initiatives with our administration. So all of those are non-dilutive costs that would help find resources and support for our special needs kids. Thank you.
So first, given the underfunding of public education, there's no easy way to guarantee that we're going to do everything we need to do for every kid, whether it's special needs or gifted or anything else. And that's tragic, and it's wrong, but it's not within the ability of the school board to change that. Talk to your legislators. I know I do. Beyond that, though, we try to be smart. We try to partner with other school districts and pool resources or take advantage of other schools' expertise. We try to cut dollars everywhere we can and put them into the classroom or put them into special needs. We do the best we can in that, and we'll continue to do it. To quickly address a couple of points, as I have been the board treasurer for the last 2 years and have served on finance committee for 4, first of all, consultant is a broad topic in our budgets. It includes things like our auditors that are required by law. It includes all kinds of categories that are helpful and useful. It is not a place where we just waste money. So nobody's going to have miracle solutions for you because they cut consultants. And I'm out of time. Thank you.
So I strongly believe all our students, regardless of their characteristics, they bring something unique. So in this case, I will attack from 3 different angles. One is the budget, one is equity, and the second one is assessment. So I will look at those 3 things. So from a budget, like Lisa said, a lot of those things are state requirements. So what I hear as I door knock and talk to our communities, that there's not enough resources allocated to our special needs students. So I will look and study that why the reason that we're not allocating enough, because this is an area where we need to make sure that we're compassionate and we allocate enough resources. The other one is also assessment. What I hear from community members is that either we over-assess and identify, or we never identify them, so they miss the services. So we need to make sure that there is a process in place that identifies kids early on. My niece has special needs, and thank God that we assess her early on, and that's why how we were able to create intervention for her. The other one, if we're really serious about our special needs, is that we need to allocate enough resources, and we need to make sure that we track their progress. And that's where also, those of us who are physically conservative need to be also compassionate and make sure that we allocate the right resources. Thank you.
So I agree with David that the idea that there's a miracle here. Did I do something wrong? Sorry. Okay. Anyway, I agree with David. I think that we're in some way hamstrung with what we have in terms of resources. And I don't know that there's a ton that we can do to change that other than the state legislature getting involved, which you mentioned. I think this is where you this is where you got to put your innovation hat on and talk about things like Matt mentioned, outside partnerships. Maybe it was with the Fraser School here locally. I know my sister has a daughter who has Down syndrome, and she's now 20 and in college here. She's from Iowa, but the journey that she had along the way was very arduous. And the best thing the teachers did for her were they were always with her along the way and did the best they could with the kid. But there are constraints. I think that the only way we will be able to solve some of these is to try to find other solutions that are outside the realm, frankly, of the government. Only because we're hamstrung with what we have. And so how do we bring the community together with the school, with the families, and try to serve our students better? Because this is a growing group of folks that there's wide variety of special needs. There's not just one. How are we making sure that we are putting our best foot forward to solve these issues?
I mean, I agree with what a lot of people have said as far as a lot of this is controlled by the state, but I refuse to believe that we can't and shouldn't take an active role in trying to do something about that. And we, as leaders in the school and school board members, should be taking a more active role in trying to lobby the legislature to change that, to change our funding, to demonstrate that we do not have enough funding for special needs and we don't have enough funding for all our students. And there's power in numbers. And if our school board got together with Hopkins School Board and Minnetonka School Board and all the school boards across the state and we're like, hey, we don't have enough money for our students, maybe something would change. But if we pretend like it's not a problem, or if we don't say something about it, nothing's going to change. Second, we have to view our special needs students, and I have a special education son. The problem is not just academic, and we could serve these students better by recognizing that they have social, emotional, educational needs that need to be met. And we do a disservice to them when we do not recognize that and service them appropriately with the social workers, with our guidance counselors, and we need to not only bulk up from an academic perspective, but from those perspectives as well, and make sure that these students get everything that they need from those services. Thank you.
Well, I definitely wish I had a magic wand and could significantly increase special education funding as well. But unfortunately, and I do understand that frustration with the development of athletic facilities, but those are separate buckets and we can't just move one over to the other. A few things that I've thought of is one is that we do have to understand that equity and equality are different things. I met with a parent who had one child in GT programming and one child in special education, and they mentioned how that some parents in GT were frustrated because GT funding was so much less than special education. But that's that equity equality discussion, is how special education services will just end up costing more money. I'm really excited to see the Special Education Advisory Group meeting more often and the school board interacting with them. It's a way that we can get an insight into the changes that we need to make. And the last thing I would say is that we do need to be careful in diagnostics. I haven't seen this as a widespread issue here in Edina, but if you look at Chicago public schools, other school districts, overdiagnosing particularly low income and students of color with special education criteria that they actually don't have is a concern that I think we also need to be looking at. So.
Did you want to finish that sentence?
That's it.
So we're going to go back to a minute and a half, and this will be the last question that's got multiple parts to it. So we're going to have you do your best to really address this from race. And yep, I know it's almost time. We're going to go a few minutes over because I think this is a pretty big topic. For those questions that we did not get to, we will email those out to the campaigns, and as we get responses back, we'll go ahead and send them out to the listserv. So we all have biases. In schools, we've seen biases present themselves between teachers, students, and school resource officers related to discipline. We've seen it with bullies. We've also seen it with this recent magazine that went out to just about every single household within the city. Who can forget the video of the school resource officer throwing a student of color across the room while she was still sitting in her desk because she wouldn't put her phone away when a teacher actually asked her to stop using it? What will you do to ensure that biases do not play a role when disciplining students and that bullying of students of color stops? Additionally, how do you promote racial equity and improved race relations as a benefit within our school? And how do you propose moving forward Yeah, this long.
You're gonna have to repeat that quick.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Not at all. Yeah.
How do you ensure that our community heals from the racial attack around education and our families of color? Did you get all that?
No, read that again.
90
Yep.
seconds too.
You got 90 seconds. Oosh. Didn't we teach this in school, how to answer a question in 90 seconds? If not, I think you guys might want to put that on the curriculum. All right, so what do you do, or what will you do to ensure that biases do not play a role when disciplining students and that bullying of students of color stops? How do you have racial equity and improved race relations be an asset within our educational system? And finally, how do you help the community heal from the attack regarding race and education that we've seen come into this particular race?
And you mean the article?
That article and what has proliferated from that. And because Chad was the last one to arrive, we're going to have Chad go first, and then we're going to go to his right.
Okay. So in terms of the first question around, what will we do to make sure that we're not, that we're being equitable in terms of, how we deal with issues. I think first and foremost is policy enforcement. We have policies in our school. They should be enforced regardless of race, gender, what have you, and we should hold ourselves accountable to that. I'll answer the third question next because I'm sure that's what people want to know here from me. My take on it is we all live in the same town and we all are dependent on each other. And I think that it's important that we work together to make sure that everyone is heard and everyone's understood, and that we look and focus on how do we accomplish the greater good with what we have and how we work together. The second piece was can you repeat the second question real quick? I was writing really quickly, but I know it takes into my time, so it's fine.
That's okay. So racial equity, improve race relations, how would that be viewed as an asset?
Okay, so my take on it is, and I'm stealing this from someone who's also on the panel, so I want to give him credit, but it was Matt Laux down the road here. So, but he said that it's important that we talk about race. It's important that we talk about, folks that, we don't all look the same. We don't have the same experiences. We need to understand those things and understand, that people are different and what they have to bring to the table and the assets that they bring. It's important that, Edina in a way is kind of a bubble, and it's not sometimes like the real world if you're out there. We need to teach our kids in our community that it's important that we respect each other in terms of, what we all bring to the table. So that's my take.
All right, 90 seconds. So I would say, number one, all type of bullying has to stop, regardless who is, whether you're a person of color or not. So the reason I say that is if we allow any type of bullying to happen in our schools to anyone, we open a floodgate. Once you open that floodgate, it will be very difficult to close. So, ensuring that we enforce 100% our policies against any type of bias or bullying is very critical. And that's, I'm very passionate about that. The other one is this whole article that came out, or this whole race issue that sometimes been attached to it. I think this is where we, as neighbors and community members, need to be very passionate about and understand each other. So if we divide ourselves, us versus them, that's only going to bring more problems. But if you listen, and like I said in the beginning of my the forum tonight, the difference is not more than 10%. We're not that different. So 90% of the things we agree on, that we need an excellent academic achievements for all our students. And because that we're all same, we do not need to always go and politicize the race case. So we just need to be compassionate and listen to each other. I think that goes a long way if we listen. And the other thing is, how do you, from racial equity and achievement, I think education is universal. So if we look at it that way and across the board create a program that handles all students, and when I say the word all students, I think we need to mean what literally it means all. We don't need to put our students into different categories. Thank you.
So first, I feel a need to be clear.
race and equity are not political issues, and I don't understand why I keep hearing it as such. That everyone is welcome here, that everyone's entitled to a good education, that we should all treat one another with respect and respect our different heritages and respect what we have in common. That's fundamental. That's not Republican or Democrat, left or right. That's just good behavior. So I don't understand why we're describing it otherwise. If you want people to understand each other and get along, the first step is to have people be together, not communicate by email, not communicate through Facebook, but actually engage in conversation and interaction. The more segregated our society is, the less success we have in this area. So right now, the best opportunity we have to get people who are different together is our public schools. It's where we all can come together, our kids can come together, our families can know each other, and we can understand what we have in common, and frankly, what we don't have in common, but that we can respect. So I would start with those things, and I can't remember all the order, so unless you want to throw another question at me, I'll stop there.
Thank you. So on the first topic, I think that it's very clear that every student is welcome in the Edina school system, period. That needs to come from the top, from the school board, from the administration, from every teacher, every staff member. It needs to be communicated in a clear and disciplined manner. And if anything is done otherwise, it needs to be disciplined very quickly and very swiftly. Things have happened in the past that have been race-based in Edina, and that at times has not been communicated to the public. I think that's important that everyone knows when things happen so the community can come together to heal after events. We have had a history here in the past 5 to 10 years of pushing it under the table or not talking about it. That is a mistake. It sets the wrong tones to our kids, the wrong tone to our teachers, and the wrong tone to our community. The second question you asked around the idea of how do we make sure that there is a good positioning for all of our students, and I think one way to think about that, that's why I'm phrasing it, is from a leadership perspective. So when teachers and anybody that's in a staff or authority position is determining who has a leadership role, whether it's a class project, whether it's on a sports team that's of a club nature, there are ways to put different people in captain's positions or ways to put people in different positions of authority or leadership. If we balance that better, more thoughtfully, that will have everybody have that opportunity to grow in that mutual respect. The third one is the divisiveness that we've seen in the community and how do we remedy that. As I mentioned earlier, we first start with commonalities. So every single person here wants the best thing for their kids, period. When the conversation starts shifting in the wrong direction, you reground it. Oftentimes you use data. As I mentioned earlier, the reading scores have not dropped while that one math score that's cited has. So you ground it with people to say, here's what's not true, here's what is true, and here's what we want to do. Those are the 3 questions. Thank you.
I wish I could talk as fast as you. I honestly, you get more put into 90 seconds than I would ever dream of. Thank you, Matt. Okay, so what I want to just say is, with respect to the first question with bias, we want to make sure that our education staff is well trained. I feel strongly that training is one of the biggest things that we are doing, and I think we're doing a fairly good job, but we need more training. We also need education amongst the community, so meaning students and parents. So training is very important. I think to have the appropriate policy, I want us to review our policy, make sure that it is there, that we have the appropriate policy, and we're enforcing that policy, and we're enforcing it consistently. We need to make sure everyone has a voice. And so if there is issues, there is a process for us for the community to complain in not a disruptive way, but in a very, a procedure. And I think sometimes we don't have the communication channels. With respect to the second one, equity as an asset, I think Edina could be a leader in this because we have been a leader in so many things. And I see the engagement here. I feel strongly that if we say that we want this to be our goal, we could do it. Thank you.
Okay, so the first thing on the referrals, the reality is that there should be a system in place where First students get a warning, then they get timeout, then whatever the steps are in place. So if those steps are followed, there shouldn't be a problem. The reality is, in the schools that I've been at, no race has a monopoly on poor behavior. There's been white kids who misbehave, Latino, Black. It does not matter. What matters is, do we have a framework where we follow the rules, and then if a student is referred, then they're referred. Getting to some of these other issues about race, I mean, to me, it's not a challenge, it's an opportunity. Edina has this stereotype now. What better way to reverse that than create an environment where we are serving the needs of all kids. We're giving all kids a opportunity to share their stories, to share their voice, and we should be leading the charge here. We have talented staff, we've got an engaged community. There's no reason that we shouldn't view this as a great opportunity to change what others say about us. The last thing I'd say, because we don't have the opportunity for a closing statement, is that my interest in education long preceded me trying to apply to come on the board. I gave up a job to work with kids of color, kids who have historically been on the margin, because I think that's important work. I also am one of the few who has not got the benefit of any political party, no access to political lists, monetary support, voluntary support, because to me, I'm beholden to the kids and the parents and the community that I represent. Thanks.
I think a fundamental tenet, I don't think a fundamental tenet of the Edina schools is that everyone is welcome here. Everyone is welcome at Edina schools. That is just a bedrock principle. And if students are excluded for whatever reason, policy needs to be upheld. Policy is on the books right now that prohibits discrimination or bullying of any kind. So policy needs to be upheld. On the second point, diversity is a strength. I think as a society, we ought to recognize that. We can't do it ourselves. We can't do it alone. As far as ethnicity, my ethnicity is 100% Norwegian. I'm extremely proud of that. I love to celebrate that, and I love to celebrate other people's ethnicities. I lived in a rooming house, as I mentioned at another candidate forum, for 9 years with people from all over the world, and I just enjoyed getting to know the different perspectives, the different foods, the different cultures, the different terms, and I think we can create a climate like that that embraces diversity, and more than embraces it, celebrates it, finds synergies in it. On the last point, the article that came out had sharp elbows, and I don't own that. I think I might have a different interpretation from some folks here. I didn't see it as an attack on a race, but I saw it as an attack on how it's presented in the Edina schools. And I think it's good to talk about it. And I think I have a different opinion from some people here. I do believe in colorblind race relations. And I think we need to have an open dialogue about that. So there are many who feel as I do. So because there is a discussion, a debate on that there is a debate. And I think we need to recognize that, and some people don't feel comfortable the way it's presented in the schools right now.
Okay, so one of the things I remember Sharaki Holly saying is don't make your first thought your last thought. And so how do we recognize that each person is more than who they look like at the first glance? If you look at me, you would not think that I was raised by a single mom, a wonderful single mom, but a single nonetheless, who had me when she was 19, and I am the first person to go to college in my family. You won't know that about me until you get to know me. And so how do we create that system in our public school system so that everyone knows that you need to get past what you see when you first come in here? And so how do we create professional development and opportunities for that so that we can have teachers who create an opportunity or a culture or an environment where everyone feels proud of who they are and where they came from and can participate in the classroom. With the discipline policy, we're looking at that right now. It's coming up on this year. We have a very sort of archaic system. It's like 25 pages long. We're ready to look at that in entirety and to look at other school districts that have different policies and to restorative justice than what we have currently. When talking about how do we heal I think it really is time for us to look at our strategic plan, to bring the entire community together and have discussions, honest discussions about what do we feel the Edina education means when we graduate. What opportunities do we want every student to have? And we have to figure out a way, which I don't have all the answers to this one, how do we create an opportunity for people who haven't felt part of the discussion to be welcome to be part of that discussion? And that's the red.
Okay, so, my opinion is the first and foremost what we need to do as a school board is to make sure that we are being vocal in our support for the equity and diversity work that is being done, and continue to push those programs to ensure that we are seeing diversity in our students and in what our students are learning about one another. The best way that we can grow is to understand the differences between one another. So not being colorblind, seeing how we differ from one another and embrace those differences and grow and learn from those differences. And I think that by offering curriculum opportunities for people to learn different cultures is a great first step in being able to remove some of those opportunities where students are bullied, because when they see and understand the other cultures and differences, then you aren't going to, personally I think a lot of bullying is done out of ignorance or just they just don't understand what is, being presented from some of the other cultures. So having that understanding, embracing it, and learning from it is essential. I think some of the other things that we can do as a school is to ensure that we are enforcing policies, and like Lisa had mentioned, taking a look at those policies, making sure that there aren't any underlying biases that are associated with them, and if there are, removing them, to make sure that we are enforcing policies that don't have a negative impact on one group as opposed to another. Thank you.
Well, I also first want to say that students of color don't have the privilege of not seeing race. As one of those kids of color that was assumed to be open enrolled, that was asked if my dad was in jail, we don't have that opportunity nor privilege to ignore colorblind or to be colorblind. And when we talk about colorblind relations, I think that sometimes is something that makes some people feel comfortable. But we have to remember that students and families of color have to deal with that burden every day. The first thing that I would look at is reforming the role of the student resource officer. I'm really excited by some of the progress made at the high school with a new student resource officer. She is incredible, and I'm really excited to see the work that can be done there. I think we do need to look at disciplinary policies. When students of color are expelled or suspended at higher rates, either we're saying students of color are more out of line, or perhaps there's something deeper there we need to look at. We need to stand up for our teachers that are having these important conversations about equity and inclusion, and I will continue to do that. These issues and talking about race relations is about humanity, but it's also about benefiting all of our students. If we have kids in our community that are going to be CEOs or lawyers or business executives, they are going to live in a multicultural world. We can't ignore that. How do we heal? I know on my part, whether I get first place or 12th place next Tuesday, I'm going to be here to support our newly elected board. I'm going to be here to say, let's have conversations in person about these tough issues. I agree with David, offline is better. We can speak to the humanity of each and every one of us. I believe in this community and I love this community. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one of the things we can do from a disciplinary and resource officer perspective is something I'm actually working on right now with the Race and Equity Committee at the city, where I'm the services chair, where we're actually one thing we're doing is data collection and analysis of things going on in the police department. We're looking for trends to see if there are variances in disciplinary discipline and how people are approached, and that's something we could do at the high school to see if there are variances. And I think that could be something helpful. Another thing, I don't think you can do too much training on things like microaggressions and implicit bias, and I think that's something that's very important that we talk about at every level, not just at the high school, but in and every staff member, because our kids don't just come into contact with teachers, they come into contact with people that work in the cafeteria and our bus drivers, and I know the school has actually done a really good job on this, but we need to reinforce it. Secondly, we have to lean into talking about race. We can't avoid it. These are difficult conversations. They make people uncomfortable, and too bad. I mean, we have to talk about it. And in doing that, it's not just because we have students of color in our schools, it serves all students well. I mean, our students are not going to be successful later in life if we do not give them the tools and equipment to talk about these discussions. Because guess what? Well, hopefully my kids aren't going to be working in Edina the rest of their life. They're going to be in a global environment. What can we do to heal? It starts by modeling good behavior as a parent, as a leader in the community, as a school board member. And can I say one more sentence? One more sentence is academic excellence and equity are not binary options. You can have academic excellence and talk about equity, and we should be a model for that, not only in our community, but around the nation.
Please join me, everyone, in thanking all of the candidates for being here this evening. Before everyone breaks, I do want to thank, in particular, the families of color gathering here this evening. This is being recorded, so that will be available online. And finally, please remember to vote either before or no later than November 7th, 8:00 p.m. For those of you who live in Precinct 9, I look forward to seeing you at Concord starting at 7 in the morning.